In the shadowed mists of 17th-century Massachusetts, where the sea whispers curses and the wind carries cries of the damned, two siblings forged a bond forbidden by God and man. Their empire rose on the gallows of the innocent, but when their twisted offspring emerged, eyes gleaming with unholy wisdom, divine wrath stirred. What if those children, born of sin, became the avengers of the betrayed? Stay and witness the fall. The salt-laced fog clung to the jagged cliffs like a shroud, veiling the Massachusetts coastline in an eternal gray haze. Winds howled through the pines, carrying the faint, ghostly moans that locals swore were the echoes of hanged souls begging for release. In Wickham's harbor, a forsaken hamlet of weathered timber homes and crooked docks, the year was 1663, and the Puritan grip on the New World squeezed tighter than a noose. Here, amid the relentless crash of Atlantic waves against black rocks, stood the crumbling foundation of what would become the Harrington Manor, a modest farmhouse inherited by two orphans whose hearts were as barren as the rocky soil they tilled. Ezekiel Harrington, tall and gaunt at 28, cut a figure like a specter from the Old Testament. His gray eyes pierced like daggers forged in hellfire, reflecting not the light of salvation but the cold calculus of ambition. His jaw, sharp as a Puritan's judgment, framed a mouth that spoke in measured, authoritative tones, each word a potential accusation. Beside him, Judith, 3 years his junior, moved with the grace of a shadow, her beauty austere, her features mirroring his in a way that unsettled even the most devout. Her dark hair, pinned severely beneath a linen cap, framed eyes that held secrets like a locked confessional. Together, they were a pair forged in the crucible of loss. Their parents, claimed by a fever that swept through Boston like God's scourge, left them debts, a dilapidated home, and an education rare for colonists of their station. Reading, writing, the arcane twists of inheritance law, these were their weapons, sharper than any blade. But in this era of fervent piety, where every failed crop or sickly child was a sign of Satan's whisper, the siblings saw not hardship, but opportunity. The colonies simmered with paranoia. Whispers of witchcraft spread like plague rats through the settlements. Communities, desperate for scapegoats, hired witch-finders, charlatans or zealots who rooted out the devil's servants for a fee, often claiming a share of the condemned lands as divine recompense. Ezekiel and Judith, with their keen minds and unyielding resolve, recognized this as their path to power. Not through toil in the fields or trade on the seas, but through the alchemy of fear, turning suspicion into gold. Their first foray began in the autumn of 1664, in the inland village of Milford, where the leaves turned blood red and the air grew thick with dread. Crops had withered under an unrelenting drought. Livestock birthed stillborn calves with twisted limbs. Omens, the villagers murmured, of infernal meddling. Ezekiel arrived on horseback, his cloak billowing like raven wings, presenting himself as a scholar of demonic signs, versed in the Malleus Maleficarum and the whispers of the unseen. Judith, posing as his devoted assistant, glided among the womenfolk, her voice a silken thread weaving doubts into certainties. They studied the village like predators surveying a herd. Who held the richest lands? Whose envy simmered beneath pious facades? Their gaze fell upon widow Constance Fletcher, a sturdy woman of 40 whose late husband had bequeathed her a thriving grain mill by the river. The mill's wheels turned ceaselessly, grinding flour even as neighbors' stores ran empty. A miracle, some said, or perhaps a curse. Ezekiel and Judith orchestrated her downfall with the precision of a clockmaker. In the dead of night, during a private examination justified by village elders, they inflicted subtle marks upon her flesh, scratches from a thorn disguised as the devil's claw. Judith whispered to neighbors, planting seeds. "Have you not seen her muttering over her hearth?" Words that chill the soul. The trial unfolded in the meeting house, a stark wooden hall lit by flickering tallow candles that cast elongated shadows like accusing fingers. Constance stood bound, her eyes wide with terror, as Ezekiel recited evidence. Spectral visions, poisoned wells, the mill's unnatural prosperity. Coached witnesses, bribed with promises of favor, testified to her nocturnal rites. The air grew heavy with the scent of fierce sweat and burning pine resin from the fire. On November 15th, under a sky bruised with storm clouds, Constance dangled from the gallows, her body twisting in the wind like a broken marionette. Her mill passed to the town, and a generous portion to the Harringtons, their fee for purging evil. This victory ignited their empire. Over the next decade, they traversed 8 communities, their carriage rumbling over rutted paths like a harbinger of doom. 57 souls met the rope or the stake under their accusations. Farmers whose lands bordered fertile rivers, merchants with hidden coffers, widows with untapped inheritances. Each death enriched them. A seized homestead here, a mortgaged fishery there. By 1675, their wealth swelled to £15,000, a fortune that could rival Boston's elite. They built their manor on the cliffs, a sprawling edifice of gray stone and leaded glass, its towers piercing the fog like accusatory spires. Inside, chambers echoed with the ghosts of their crimes. Ledgers detailing bribes, forged testimonies hidden in secret compartments, maps marking profitable targets. Yet prosperity bred peril. Inheritance laws loomed like a divine edict. Without heirs, their empire could fracture, claimed by distant kin or the crown. Marriage outside the bloodline risked exposure. A spouse might unearth their sins, demand a share. In their twisted logic, the solution emerged, a union between themselves. Incest, whispered in scripture as abomination, yet permissible in extremis under colonial loopholes, justified by necessity. It was no act of passion, but a covenant of greed, sealing their secrets in flesh. The ceremony unfolded on the winter solstice of 1675, in the manor's basement, a cavernous space lit by sputtering torches that danced shadows across damp stone walls. The air reeked of earth and incense, masking the metallic tang of fear. A corrupt minister, ensnared in a prior trial where the siblings spared him for a price, intoned vows twisted from holy writ. In the eyes of the law, if not the Almighty, he muttered, his hands trembling as he bound their wrists with a cord stained red, symbolic blood of their shared vein. No witnesses save 2 servants, eyes downcast, throats tight with threats of accusation should they speak. Ezekiel's voice, steady as a judge's gavel, pledged fidelity. Judith's, cool as ocean mist, echoed it. They consummated not in ecstasy, but efficiency. In a chamber above where the sea's roar drowned any cry of conscience. Pregnancy followed swiftly, a seeming blessing in early 1676. Judith's belly swelled under her somber gowns, her condition hidden from prying eyes. They summoned Sarah Whiteham, a renowned midwife from Boston, her fee exorbitant, her discretion bought. Exotic foods arrived by ship, dried fruits from the Indies, herbs from London, stockpiled in the pantry's cool shadows. Cradles of polished mahogany, draped in silk the color of fresh snow, awaited in a nursery where sunlight filtered through mullioned windows, casting ethereal patterns like angelic script. But as summer waned into autumn, omens crept in. Judith's womb stirred with unnatural ferocity. Kicks like battles, twists that left her gasping, skin bruised from within. Sarah, her lined face etched with decades of births, palpated the swell under candlelight, her fingers recoiling. They war with each other, she confided to her assistant, Emma, in the kitchen's hearth glow, where pots simmered with herbal brews. Twins, aye, but these, they move as if possessed by wrath. Ezekiel scoffed publicly, but in his study, amid stacks of leather-bound tomes, Galen's Anatomies, Paracelsus on Monstrosities, he pored over passages on close kin births. Warnings leaped from yellowed pages. Deformities as punishment for defying nature's law. Offspring cursed with twisted forms. Minds sharp but souls tormented. The labor commenced on March 15, 1677, under a moon veiled in clouds, as if heaven averted its gaze. Judith's screams echoed through the manor like banshee wails, the halls filled with the acrid scent of sweat and blood. For 48 agonizing hours, she writhed on linen sheets soaked crimson, her nails clawing the bedposts. Sarah and Emma worked tirelessly, applying compresses of willow bark, chanting prayers that mingled with Judith's curses. When the twins emerged, Gabriel and Raphael, named for archangels in a desperate bid for redemption, the room fell silent but for the infants' eerie, synchronized cries. Their forms defied creation. Limbs forked at grotesque angles, like branches warped by storm. Skulls bulbous with extraneous protrusions, eyes unnaturally wide and piercing. Torsos fused by fleshy bridges, suggesting shared viscera. Yet, amid the horror, a miracle or curse, they grasped Sarah's fingers with purposeful strength, their gazes locking in silent communion. No mewling helplessness. Instead, an alertness that chilled the soul, as if ancient spirits inhabited infantile shells. The years unfurled like a scroll of judgment. By their first birthday, confined to the manor's upper floors, away from servants' eyes, lest rumors of divine retribution spread, the twins defied their frailties. Propped in custom chairs of padded oak, they babbled not nonsense, but patterns hinting at language. By 4, they devoured books smuggled into their chamber. Bibles, almanacs, legal tracts. Their voices, high yet resonant, debated theology with the fervor of scholars. If God punishes sin, Gabriel once queried, his twisted hand gesturing, are we his instrument? Raphael, fused at the hip, nodded in eerie sync, their shared pulse quickening. Ezekiel and Judith's empire peaked in these years, their witch hunts a symphony of terror. In Salem village, they accused a cluster of families, seizing orchards heavy with fruit. In Hadley Crossing, a blacksmith's forge fell to them after his demonic hammer strikes were deemed spells. Wealth poured in, silver plate gleaming in candlelit dinners, silks draping their forms like false piety. But the twins' isolation bred unintended intimacy. The siblings, assuming their offspring's minds as malformed as their bodies, spoke freely in their presence. Plotting accusations, tallying profits, laughing at the gullibility of the godly. This hubris sowed their doom. By 1685, at 8 years old, Gabriel and Raphael, bodies frail, minds like razors, had pieced together the mosaic of their parents' sins. Overhearing whispers in the night, rifling through unlocked drawers during rare unsupervised moments, they uncovered ledgers of lies. Names of the hanged, properties plundered, the incestuous marriage that birthed them. Rage bloomed in their conjoined hearts, a spiritual fire kindled by biblical verses they memorized. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. But they claimed it as their own, vessels of retribution for a lineage steeped in abomination. Their intellects, unhampered by physical chains, wove plans in the dim glow of their chamber's lantern. They practiced stillness, feigning sleep as parents entered, absorbing every damning word. Grief for their condition twisted into purpose. Their deformities, not random curse, but emblem of parental iniquity. Symbolic of souls entangled in sin, bodies mirroring the moral contortions of greed overriding God's law. Opportunity knocked in summer 1685 with Margaret Caldwell's arrival, a fresh-faced servant of 20, seeking work amid the manor's echoing halls. Unbeknownst to her, her father, Thomas Caldwell, had swung from the gallows 6 years prior, his forge claimed by the Harringtons' machinations. Margaret's eyes, bright with hope, scanned the stone facade, oblivious to the shadows within. The twins, from their hidden vantage, sensed in her a key to unlocking justice. As she dusted the hearths and carried trays, they began to observe, to plot, whispers in the dark, gestures synchronized like a divine duet. The air in the manor grew thicker, charged with impending storm. Outside, fishermen crossed themselves at the cliffside marker, a stone etched with 1687, the year of reckoning yet to come. Whispers spread. The Harringtons' fortune, built on blood, carried a haunting legacy. Divine justice, patient as the tides, prepared to crash upon their shores. The twins, born of forbidden union, embodied themes eternal. Guilt's inheritance, sin's deformation of the soul, the inexorable pull of redemption through exposure. In their brilliant, tormented minds flickered the spark of revolution, a chilling testament that even the most malformed vessels could channel heavenly wrath. As the seasons turned, The siblings' empire teetered, unaware of the avengers nurtured in their midst. Ezekiel's gray eyes, once piercing, now darted with unease. Judith's composure cracked in solitary moments, her hands trembling over ledgers. The twins' communication evolved, coded taps on their shared flesh, glances laden with strategy. They pondered psychology. How fear, the weapon their parents wielded, could be turned inward. Biblical symbolism infused their resolve. Like Cain and Abel inverted, siblings birthing monstrosity, yet the monsters rising as judges. Margaret became their unwitting bridge. One evening, as she tended their chamber, adjusting quilts over twisted limbs, averting eyes from the unnatural, the twins spoke. Not in pleas but probing questions. "Tell us of your father, miss. Was he a good man?" Her response, tear-choked, revealed fragments of loss. They stored it, weaving it into their web. The manor's atmosphere thickened with spiritual chill. Drafts whispering scripture, shadows lengthening like accusatory fingers. Ezekiel dreamed of gallows turning upon him. Judith woke to phantom cries. The twins, in their isolation, reflected on justice. Not mere punishment, but revelation, stripping away facades to expose the rot beneath. Their condition, a living parable of incest's curse, fueled a dread that permeated the stone walls. By autumn, plans solidified. The twins, leveraging their intellect, drafted notes in childish scrawl, disguised revelations planted for Margaret to find. The forge was stolen. One read, hidden in a drawer. Curiosity piqued. She would question, unravel threads leading to truth. This was no hasty vengeance. It was symphonic, paced with the rhythm of tides. The Harringtons' downfall loomed, a cinematic unraveling where light pierced fog, illuminating sins long buried. In this tale, rooted in colonial grimness, echoed eternal truths. Power wed to perversion births its own destroyers. The deformed heirs, symbols of divine irony, prepared to claim their legacy. Not wealth, but retribution's cold embrace. The Harrington Manor loomed like a sentinel of stone against the relentless Massachusetts gales, its windows flickering with candlelight that danced like uneasy spirits in the encroaching dusk. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scents of polished oak, herbal poultices, and the faint, underlying rot of secrets long festering in the damp cellars. It was summer 1685, and the cliffs below echoed with the ceaseless pound of waves, a rhythmic reminder of time's inexorable march toward judgment. Margaret Caldwell, a lithe young woman of 20 with calloused hands and eyes shadowed by grief, crossed the threshold as a servant, her apron starched white against the manor's gloom. She sought only wages to mend her shattered life. Her father, Thomas, hanged for witchcraft in 1679, his forge seized by whispers of infernal pacts. Unaware that the Harringtons' hands had pulled those strings, she entered their domain, where the air itself seemed to pulse with unspoken maledictions. Gabriel and Raphael, the 8-year-old twins, resided in an upper chamber transformed into a gilded cage. Walls lined with shelves of forbidden tomes, floors cushioned with Persian rugs to muffle their labored movements. Their fused forms, a grotesque tapestry of limbs branching unnaturally and torsos bridged by veined tissue, confined them to wheeled contraptions of brass and leathercraft by a Boston artisan at great expense. Yet their minds soared unbound, eyes gleaming with intellect that pierced the veil of deception. Speech came haltingly through contorted mouths, but their thoughts flowed like quicksilver. From hidden vantage points, peepholes drilled in wainscoting, mirrors angled to spy corridors, they observed the manor's rhythms, cataloging visitors' faces, eavesdropping on murmurs of malice. Their strategy to enlist Margaret unfolded with the precision of a biblical parable, echoing the cunning of David against Goliath, where weakness became weapon. Unable to cry out or scrawl freely, they devised ingenious communiques. Scraps of parchment tucked into dustpans during her cleaning rounds, inscribed with charcoal pilfered from the hearth. The first message, simple as a seed: "Look beneath the study floorboard, truth of fortunes." Margaret's fingers trembled as she pried it loose one afternoon, sunlight slanting through leaded panes to illuminate faded ink on yellowed ledgers. Entries sprawled like sins confessed. Payments for services rendered in which trials, inventories of plundered estates, mills, fisheries, acres of timberland, valued in pounds sterling, annotated with costs for witness preparation and evidence fabrication. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of revelation, as the pieces aligned. Her father's name, crossed out with a flourish, his forge reassigned to the Harringtons. But the twins' aid extended beyond disclosures. It wove a web of protection, spiritual in its foresight, as if guided by providential insight. They discerned the cadence of footsteps, Ezekiel's heavy tread, Judith's gliding whisper, and the sense of visitors, the acrid tobacco of corrupt magistrates, the cloying perfume of bribed midwives. Through coded signals, a drop toy echoing down halls, a deliberate cough, they warned Margaret of peril. Hide when the man with the scarred hand comes, one note urged, referring to a thug employed for enforcements. In these acts, the twins embodied themes of divine guardianship, their deformities a crucible forging empathy from suffering, redeeming their cursed birth through acts of quiet heroism. As autumn leaves bled crimson across the landscape, mirroring the blood on the Harringtons' hands, the twins escalated. A pivotal missive directed Margaret to the study's false wall, a panel concealed behind a tapestry of the fall of man, its threads depicting serpents and forbidden fruit in ironic symbolism. With a hidden latch clicked under cover of night, while thunder masked her movements, she uncovered the sanctum. Iron-bound chests brimming with damning archives. Ledgers chronicled 15 years of atrocity, 57 executions tallied like livestock, properties appraised with cold detachment. Widow Fletcher's mill, 500 pounds, post-hanging seizure. Notations revealed the machinery of evil. Bribe to Elder Simmons, 20 pounds for testimony. Mark inflicted on accused. Thorn, devil's claw mimic. The air in that compartment grew stifling, charged with the spiritual weight of stolen lives, as if the souls of the hanged lingered, demanding witness. Discovery ignited terror in Margaret's soul, a dread laced with moral imperative, echoing the biblical call to expose iniquity. To flee would invite pursuit, confrontation, certain death. Her peril mirrored the Harringtons' victims. Isolation, accusation, erasure. In prayerful vigils by her attic candle, she pondered justice, her fingers tracing a silver cross inherited from her father. Inspiration dawned like a shaft of dawn light. Seek an outsider unbound by colonial corruption. Father Benedict Thorne, a Jesuit newly arrived from France, resided in Boston's modest chapel. His reputation whispered among the faithful, a scholar of theology and philosophy, connected to European courts and the Vatican's archives. His eyes, deep-set and compassionate, held the fire of one who had witnessed inquisitions and heresies across the seas. Margaret's approach was veiled as a confessional plea, slipping into the chapel under a hooded cloak, the scent of incense enveloping her like holy armor. "Father, I bear witness to sins that mock God's law," she murmured through the lattice screen, her voice a tremor. Skepticism furrowed Thorne's brow initially. Tales of colonial intrigue were commonplace, but as she proffered copied fragments, his expression shifted to grim resolve. The evidence unfolded like a scroll of judgment. Financial trails leading to gallows, maps redrawn with pilfered boundaries, lists of the doomed annotated with fabricated sins. Thorne's hands, calloused from turning ancient pages, traced the entries, his mind weaving connections. This was no mere greed. It was a perversion of Puritan zeal, twisting scripture into shackles for profit. Spiritually, it reeked of Luciferian hubris, siblings defying natural and divine order, their incest a echo of Lot's daughters, but devoid of desperation, fueled only by avarice. October's chill winds carried Thorne to the manor, his black cassock billowing like a raven's wings, presented as a courteous visit. Ezekiel greeted him at the door, his gray eyes appraising, Judith beside him with a smile as sharp as a stiletto. The hall's grandeur impressed. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light, portraits of stern ancestors glowering from walls. Yet Thorne sensed the pall, a spiritual miasma, the residue of unabsolved guilt, like the air in a desecrated tomb. Conversations flowed politely over tea scented with cloves, but the priest's queries probed, "How fares your family in these trying times? The Lord tests us through afflictions." Ezekiel boasted of their divine work, purging witches. Judith nodded, her fingers tight on her cup. The request to see the children came casually, masked as benevolence. Up the creaking stairs, past locked doors hiding more secrets, to the chamber where Gabriel and Raphael awaited. The room smelled of liniment and ink, sunlight filtering through curtains to halo their forms. Thorn's breath caught, their deformities a living sermon on the wages of sin, bodies contorted as if sculpted by a wrathful hand. Yet their gazes met his with uncanny clarity. No fear, only anticipation. Halting words spilled forth, gestures amplifying. Parents? Lies? Kill for gold. Thorn knelt, his crucifix glinting, and listened as they recounted overheard plots, hidden caches. Their maturity stunned him. Philosophical insights on evil's nature, biblical allusions to Cain's mark, as if their suffering had distilled wisdom from pain. Here were souls trapped in profane vessels, crying for redemption, their intelligence a divine counterbalance to parental depravity. Departure was a facade of amity, but the die was cast. Thorn's Boston quarters became a war room, parchments stacking like indictments. Leveraging church networks, couriers to London, informants in colonies, he amassed proof. Bank records subpoenaed under ecclesiastical authority, affidavits from victims' kin recounting coerced testimonies. A breakthrough, Marcus Fletcher, a weathered accomplice, cracked under Thorn's confessional pressure. In a dimly lit vestry, amid flickering vigil lights, Marcus confessed. Planting spectral evidence, coaching perjuries for coin. He detailed the incestuous marriage, a pact to hoard their blood money, and horrors anew. Plans to exhibit the twins as medical curiosities to European nobles, profiting from their agony. Thorn's face paled. This was abomination layered upon abomination, exploiting divine judgment for gain. The twins emerged as linchpins, their testimonies transcribed in secret rendezvous orchestrated by Margaret. Moonlit meetings in the manor stables, horses nickering cover. Gabriel and Raphael described torments, invasive proddings without mercy, intellect tested under duress, documentation for sale to distant scholars on consanguineous effects. Air words painted a psychological hell, parents viewing them not as offspring, but experiments, symbols of their own moral deformity. Spiritually chilling, it evoked Job's trials inverted. Suffering inflicted by kin, not God, testing faith's limits. December's frosts gripped the land, tensions crystallizing like ice on windows. Thorn's dossier swelled, but exposure risked backlash. Ezekiel's network of thugs, Judith's poisons. The twins, sensing the noose tightening, amplified efforts. Hidden notes evolved to dossiers, stashed in alcoves only they could reach via custom levers. Their defiance bloomed, a spiritual rebellion against filial bonds corrupted by sin. Ezekiel's discovery shattered the fragile peace. Faint scratches on his study's secret panel, documents askew, incriminating pages dotted subtly. Paranoia surged, interrogation of Margaret in the cellar, her wrists bound, questions barked under lantern's glare. She endured, revealing partial truths, but discrepancies pointed inward. The siblings' blindness to their children's agency, viewing them as mere burdens, sealed their fate. While they hunted phantoms, the twins chronicled anew plans for expansion to Connecticut, exploiting native strife with witchcraft claims. Whispers of accidents for the boys, falls from cliffs, winter fevers. In response, Gabriel and Raphael's psychology mirrored their parents' ruthlessness, but sanctified by justice. They manipulated routines, feigned illnesses to draw attention, planted false trails leading to external suspects. Their bond, fused in flesh and spirit, became a conduit for vengeance, embodying redemption's arc. From cursed birth to instruments of divine equity. The manor's atmosphere thickened, shadows lengthening as if hell's fingers reached upward. Thorn prayed for guidance, his beads clicking like countdowns. Margaret, vessel of courage, bridged worlds. The twins, in quiet moments, pondered eternity. their deformities a temporal cross, souls yearning for absolution. As snow blanketed the cliffs, the stage set for climax. Exposure looming, sin's harvest ripe. In this saga, rooted in colonial shadows, pulsed eternal motifs. Guilt's inheritance, justice's slow grind, the haunting legacy of blood defiled. The Harrington Empire, built on gallows, teetered toward abyss, propelled by the very lives it twisted. The winter solstice of 1685 cloaked Wickham's harbor in a veil of frost and foreboding, the Atlantic's roar a constant dirge against the cliffs. Snowflakes danced like lost souls in the biting wind, settling on the Harrington Manor's slate roof, where chimneys exhaled smoke tinged with the acrid scent of burning ledgers, pages of sin reviewed in secrecy. Inside, the air thickened with the weight of unspoken atrocities, candles guttering in silver holders casting elongated shadows that twisted like the damned in purgatory. Gabriel and Raphael, the 8-year-old twins, lay in their chamber, their conjoined forms swathed in quilts embroidered with biblical motifs, ironic shields against the chill of their existence. Their eyes, sharp as prophets' visions, gleamed in the dim light, minds ablaze with a plan forged in the crucible of suffering. Rather than succumb to terror at their parents' murderous whispers, overheard plots of accidental ends for the burdensome offspring, the twins channeled their dread into divine strategy. Their intellects, unmarred by the flesh's distortions, drew from Scripture's depths. Like David slinging stones at Goliath, they would wield their frailty as a weapon, turning the Harringtons' arsenal of deception against them. Sacrifice loomed as a sacred offering. If their lives extinguished in the pursuit of justice, it would echo Christ's atonement, redeeming the blood of the innocents spilled for greed. Their plan, elegant in its terror, mirrored the biblical flood, a cleansing deluge engineered not by God, but by his unlikely vessels, washing away the corruption of incestuous empire. The date, December 21st, pulsed with symbolic potency. The 10th anniversary of Ezekiel and Judith's profane union, a solstice ritual where they shed facades, reveling in their unholy partnership. In the upper salon, amid velvet drapes and crystal decanters, they would pore over victim rosters, toasting with wine stained red as blood, plotting expansions to Carolina's untamed frontiers. The twins, eavesdroppers for years through floorboards thin as veils, knew every cadence of this macabre festivity. The clink of coins counted, the rustle of maps redrawn with stolen lands. This night, they resolved, would invert the celebration, from commemoration of evil to its cataclysmic exposure. Preparation had been a symphony of subtlety, conducted in the shadows of their confinement. Despite limbs that forked unnaturally and torsos bridged by pulsating tissue, they fashioned tools from the mundane. A spoon's edge sharpened on stone for prying, threads unraveled from linens to bind mechanisms. From their parents' library, shelves groaning with tomes on law, anatomy, and architecture. They absorbed knowledge like sponges in a deluge. Newton's principles of motion, Vitruvius on structures, became weapons. They calculated loads and stresses, weakening beams with meticulous notches, hidden under rugs or behind panels. Each sabotage a prayerful act, symbolizing the erosion of sin's foundation, as if divine hands guided their twisted fingers. Father Thorn, their celestial ally, wove into the plot with martial precision. His past as a battlefield chaplain in Europe's wars lent tactical acumen. Reconnaissance mapped the manor's labyrinth, secret passages for escape, alcoves for ambush. Signals flickered through windows, lantern flashes in Morse-like code, devised from naval texts, coordinating the assault. Thorn assembled a cadre of the righteous. Colonial magistrates with warrants etched in iron resolve, physicians armed with salves and stretchers, clerks with quills poised to chronicle damnation, an engineer versed in fortifications. This was no mere arrest. It was an exorcism, purging the demonic grip of greed from the land. As dusk bled into night, the manor's halls echoed with the siblings' preparations. Ezekiel, his gray eyes alight with avarice, spread parchments across a mahogany table. Inventories of pilfered fortunes, jewels glinting like fallen stars, deeds to orchards heavy with forbidden fruit. Judith, her austere beauty hardened by years of calculation, poured brandy, its amber glow reflecting in her cold gaze. They murmured of new horizons, Carolina's chaos ripe for exploitation. Native unrest twisted into witchcraft accusations, lands seized under godly pretense. The air reeked of wax and ink, underpinned by the spiritual rot of souls long bartered to mammon. Below, the twins synchronized breaths, their shared pulse a metronome of fate. Gabriel, the strategist, reviewed mental blueprints. Raphael, the executor, tested a final lever, a cord rigged to initiate the cascade. Their courage, forged in isolation's forge, transcended age. Moral clarity burned bright, unclouded by the world's illusions, a beacon against parental darkness. This was redemption incarnate, children of sin becoming harbingers of justice, their deformities emblems of divine irony, proving that even the broken could mend the world's fractures. At 7 o'clock sharp, Thorn's knock resounded like judgment's gavel, the oak door vibrating under gloved knuckles. Ezekiel answered, irritation masking unease, his silhouette framed in the threshold's glow. "Father Thorn," he intoned, voice smooth as oiled deceit. An unexpected blessing on this chill eve. Judith hovered behind, her smile a veneer over suspicion. The priest, cassock whispering against floorboards, entered with purposeful stride. His entourage lingering in shadows outside, horses tethered, lanterns hooded. The ostensible purpose, concern for Margaret's soul, spiritual solace for the family amid winter's trials. But Thorn's queries sliced deeper. Allusions to hidden sins, veiled references to overheard confessions. Ezekiel's jaw tightened. Judith's fingers whitened on her shawl. The request to see the children hung in the air like incense. To offer prayers for their afflicted forms. Refusal tempted, cloaked in feigned care. They tire easily, Father, yet suspicion of suspicion compelled assent, lest it fuel doubts. They ascended the stairs, footsteps echoing like a procession to Calvary, Thorn leading, the siblings trailing with predatory watchfulness. The chamber door creaked open, revealing the twins propped in their wheeled throne, faces illuminated by a single taper's flame. The air held the scent of medicinal herbs and parchment, notes hidden in crevices, ready for revelation. Thorn knelt, crucifix catching light, and uttered the coded invocation. The Lord sees all hidden things. Gabriel and Raphael erupted in unison, voices strained yet resonant, a choral indictment piercing the silence. On September 14, 1679, Gabriel intoned, his protruded skull casting eerie shadows. You conspired in the cellar with Marcus Fletcher against Thomas Caldwell. Mother disbursed silver from Rebecca Whitmore's trove. Father dictated the puppet's placement. Hair from Caldwell's daughter, verse inscribed to mimic curses. Raphael seamlessly continued, their fusion a metaphor for unbreakable testimony. Hidden under the anvil in his forge, discovered by primed witnesses. His hanging yielded his lands to your coffers. The siblings recoiled as if struck by heavenly thunder, faces draining of color, the room's atmosphere charging with psychic storm. Secrets guarded like holy relics, spilled from infantile lips, dates, names, methods. The twins delved deeper. Caches beneath floorboards, 37 jewels including Mary Hutchins' ring. Poisoned livestock to fabricate curses. Bribery webs ensnaring officials. Each revelation a spiritual lash, exposing the moral void at their core. Guilt unacknowledged, sin unrepented, echoing Cain's fratricide but amplified to genocide for gain. Ezekiel's composure shattered. Judith's eyes darted like trapped beasts. Attempts at dismissal, delusions from their maladies, crumbled as Thorn unfurled corroborating scrolls. Fletcher's confession, victims' kin affidavits. Panic ignited contingency. Ezekiel lunged for a concealed pistol in his vest, barrel aimed at Thorn's heart. But the twins' sabotage prevailed. Metal shards, inserted via painstaking nocturnal labors, jammed the mechanism. The explosion rent the air, shrapnel embedding in Ezekiel's hand, blood spraying like sacrificial offering, his scream a howl of thwarted evil. Judith, knife flashing from her sleeve, charged the doorway, now breached by officials alerted by the blast. Her foot triggered a loosened plank, a pitfall engineered with counterweights from clockwork studies. She plummeted, ankle twisting with a crack, blade clattering harmlessly. Mechanisms whirred. Doors barricaded with falling beams, windows shuttered by rigged pulleys. The manor, once fortress of iniquity, transformed into a divine snare. The climax unfolded in the grand hall, chandeliers swaying like censers in a profane mass. Ezekiel, maimed but feral, and Judith, limping with venomous resolve, converged on the twins. Final bid to silence the betrayers. Ungrateful abominations! Ezekiel snarled, clutching an improvised club. But Gabriel tugged a concealed cord. Raphael echoed with a mirrored pull. The structure groaned, a symphony of retribution. Weakened joists collapsing in calculated sequence, beams tumbling like Babel's tower. Dust billowed, timbers cracked with thunderous reports, the hall fracturing into chaos. Yet precision reigned. Debris pinned the siblings beneath oaken weights, their cries muffled in the rubble, while an alcove, reinforced by the twins' foresight, shielded Thorn, officials, and the children. Symbolic perfection. The Empire's collapse mirroring Soul's downfall, hidden chambers bursting open, spilling relics of crime, bones of vanished victims, troves of bloodied wealth. Rescuers breached the wreckage under starlit skies, lanterns piercing the haze. They unearthed the scene. Ezekiel and Judith, crushed yet alive, faces contorted in defeat. The twins, bruised but triumphant, their fused forms a living testament to resilience. Physicians tended wounds, clerks catalogued exposures, documents fluttering like released spirits. The manor's fall, a physical and metaphysical catharsis, liberated the captives, embodying themes of divine justice. Sin's house divided against itself, redemption through intellect's light piercing darkness. In the aftermath, as snow blanketed the ruins, Gabriel and Raphael breathed free air, their legacy haunting. Proof that even from forbidden unions, holiness could emerge, turning curse to crusade. The Harrington sins, once buried, now etched in colonial lore. A chilling parable of guilt's inexorable retribution, where the deformed became deliverers, echoing eternal spiritual truths. Dawn broke cold and merciless over the shattered bones of Harrington Manor. Snow hissed across the jagged timbers, and the Atlantic wind carried away the last curls of smoke from a dynasty that had murdered its way to greatness. Beneath a fallen beam lay Ezekiel and Judith, faces frozen in the exact instant their gray eyes registered the impossible. The instruments of their downfall were the very children they had birthed to protect their blood-soaked fortune. Their mouths still hung open, as if trying to accuse heaven itself of unfair play. But heaven had chosen stranger champions. Gabriel and Raphael Harrington, 8 years old, bodies twisted like roots forced through stone, breathed the free air for the first time without bars or locked doors between them and the sky. Bruised, half buried in plaster dust, yet alive, their shared pulse beat steady beneath the rescuers' hands. When the physicians lifted them onto stretchers, the twins did not cry. Instead, Gabriel turned his malformed skull toward the ruins and whispered a single line from the Book of Revelation, voice clear as winter glass. Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils. Raphael finished the verse in perfect unison, and every man present felt the hair rise on his neck. These were no ordinary children. In the weeks that followed, Colonial Massachusetts discovered what true reckoning felt like. The courts moved with a speed that startled even the most jaded magistrates. Within 9 days, Ezekiel and Judith Harrington were declared guilty posthumously on 57 counts of capital murder, alongside charges of judicial corruption, bribery, grand larceny, and conspiracy against the Commonwealth. The sentences, read aloud in Boston's Meeting House, were symbolic hanging in effigy on Gallows Hill, followed by the public burning of the straw-stuffed corpses while the crowd stood in utter silence. No chairs. Only the crackle of flame and the smell of justice long delayed. But the gavel did not stop falling there. The Harrington ledgers, salvaged from iron chests that had survived the collapse like black sarcophagi, painted a map of rot that reached into every corner of New England. Names of bribed elders, sheriffs, even ministers appeared in neat, merciless columns. Properties changed hands 3, 4, 5 times after executions, each transfer greased with the blood of the innocent. The governor's council, pale and trembling, authorized a special tribunal, the first of its kind in the colonies, to trace every acre, every shilling, every stolen cradle and cooking pot back to the families of the hanged. For 3 years the work continued. Clerks labored by candlelight, matching deeds against death warrants. Widows who had remarried and moved to Rhode Island were found and handed title to orchards they had not seen in 20 winters. Orphans, now grown, wept openly in court as 12 acres of riverfront farmland were signed over to them with the seal of the Commonwealth. In total, more than £25,000 worth of land and goods flowed back to the victims' kin, an act of restitution so vast it staggered the colonial economy and forced the creation of entirely new legal mechanisms for restorative justice. The Harrington Restitution Act of 1688 would be cited for centuries as the moment English common law first bent toward the idea that justice must sometimes reach beyond the grave. And at the center of it all sat 2 small boys who should never have survived the night. Dr. William Harvey, physician to King Charles II himself, crossed the Atlantic at the governor's urgent request. He expected to find pitiable invalids. Instead, he met scholars trapped in ruined bodies. Under his care, the deliberate cruelty of the Harringtons was laid bare. Joints deliberately unexercised until they stiffened, muscles atrophied by years of binding, minds sharpened on forbidden books yet starved of human touch. With proper food, gentle manipulation, and wheeled chairs of Harvey's own design, the twins began to move. Slowly at first, a finger that could now turn a page unaided, then an arm that could lift a quill. The transformations were documented in Latin so precise it would be studied in Edinburgh and Padua for generations. Their minds, unchained at last, became a wonder of the age. By their 10th birthday they debated theology with Harvard divines, solved algebraic equations that stumped the colony's best surveyors, and composed Latin poetry whose melancholy beauty moved grown men to tears. When a London publisher offered a fortune for The Confessions of the Harrington Twins, they refused payment. Instead, they demanded the proceeds establish a school, the first in the New World dedicated solely to children, deemed by nature or man unfit for learning. The Harrington Academy opened its doors in 1694 on land once owned by widow Constance Fletcher, the siblings' very first victim. An eternal circle closed. As adults, Gabriel and Raphael Harrington walked their separate yet intertwined paths with a dignity that silenced every whisper of monster. Gabriel, the elder by 7 minutes, became the colony's foremost jurist on evidence and the protection of vulnerable witnesses. His treatise on the testimony of children and the infirm, published 1712, laid down principles still taught in law courts today, that truth is not measured by the straightness of a spine or the clarity of speech, but by the coherence of memory and the fire of conscience. Special tribunals he designed heard cases in private chambers, with screens to shield child witnesses from their abusers, innovations born directly from the nights he spent listening to his parents plot murder above his head. Raphael chose healing over judgment. As Dr. Raphael Harrington, he revolutionized the treatment of crippled and abused children, insisting that every patient be addressed by name and title, never by deformity. His school in Boston grew into a renowned academy where blind children learned mathematics by touch, deaf children debated philosophy through signs, and those born with twisted limbs painted frescoes that adorned the walls of meeting houses from Charleston to Halifax. When skeptics asked how such broken vessels could contribute to society, Raphael would simply gesture to the laughter echoing through the corridors and reply, "Listen, that is contribution enough." Both married. Both fathered children whose limbs were straight, whose eyes were clear, whose laughter held no echo of ancestral shame. The curse of close blood ended with them, as cleanly as a surgeon's knife severs infected flesh. Their descendants would scatter across a new nation, carrying in their veins the quiet triumph of justice over abomination. On the cliff where the manor once stood, the Commonwealth erected a simple granite marker. Its inscription, carved at the twins' request, reads, "Here fell the house that murder built. Let no one say the devil made them do it. They chose, and here rose 2 who chose otherwise. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Gabriel and Raphael Harrington, 1687. Travelers still pause there. Fishermen still cross themselves when their boats pass beneath the cliff at dusk. And on certain winter nights, when the wind howls up from the sea and the stars burn cold, some swear they hear the faint sound of children reciting Latin verses, two voices perfectly entwined, laughing at the dark. The Harrington twins did not simply survive their parents' sin. They turned it inside out, made it into light, and lit a path that others, centuries later, still walk. Because sometimes, the most powerful judgment does not come thundering from heaven. Sometimes it is whispered by a child who was never supposed to speak at all.